You'll never guess what the second most common tool in my workshop is. It's not chisels, it's not hand planes, that takes the first spot, but strops. And today I'll show you how I make mine, and I include 4 design tweaks that you don't commonly see. So I'll see you on the other side of the intro. How's it? My name is Dylan, and as always, a very warm welcome to my workshop and Ply Creations. So today I'm building another strop, and I do have quite a few, and I use them for different tools and carving chisels and draw knives and blades and chisels and so forth. And today I'm building another one, and I'm showing you how I go about the process, and as I mentioned earlier, some design tweaks that you might find useful and don't generally see everywhere on the internet. So let's go through the basic materials, raw materials we'll be using. I'll be discussing them in a bit more material as we go through the steps. So hang on, and I'll give you more details there. But as a start, you'll need a base. So I prefer man-made materials, if you will, either plywood or medium density fiberboard or high density fiberboard, which I'm using in this case. When I do build strops, I do prefer either MDF or HDF. You'll need, of course, some leather, and I've always got a ready supply of leather available in the workshop. You'll need some sandpaper, in this case 80 grit. You'll need a dowel like that, and of course you'll need glues to get it all together, but as I mentioned, we'll discuss that in details when we get to or go through the different steps in the process. So off to the bench and getting the leather onto the base. Let's quickly talk about the base that we'll be using. As I mentioned, I'm using HDF, high density fiberboard. I do reach for either high density fiberboard or medium density fiberboard when making my strops. I have made strops from plywood. You can really make it from any one of the 3 as long as the material is flat front to back and across its width. That allows you to keep your blades square and straight along the edge when you use the strop. So it does need to be flat. First, I mentioned that we need to have a look at is its width, and this may in your case differ from mine. My width is a little wider than my widest plain blade. I'll be using this strop for plain blades and chisels. Next, on the other 2 dimensions, in its height and its length, is where my first design tweaks come into play. Let's talk about the height first, and you'll notice that I've laminated 2 sections together. A single sheet in this case is around about 18 millimeters, or let's say 3/4 of an inch, and then I glued them together. Did that off camera, so I didn't need to bore you with the process. And the reason why I like to have my strops higher than my workbench is I'll show you. When you're working on the back of a chisel, you risk the bottom of your chisel handle hitting the work surface that you are working on. And there's also a level of self-preservation involved in the process. As I'm working on the chisel, I'm putting my hands around the chisel to keep it stable, and the height then helps me not to drag my knuckles across my work surface, something I'd like to avoid. Then that's the first design change that we're working on. The second one is the length of the strop, and you need to keep in mind that you are loading your leather with a honing compound. The honing compound is an abrasive and it removes metal. The longer you can stay with your blade on your abrasive surface, the fewer strokes you need to take to be able to hone it to a similar level on a shorter strop, where you really need to take a lot of small strokes to be able to get to the same place. So that's why I prefer to have my strops a little bit longer. It's not without its disadvantages though, and I'll probably do another video showing you how I use my strops. It's not as obvious as many might think, but I'll do another video and I'll show you what the disadvantages of a longer strop is. Next step is going over cutting the leather and getting that onto the strop, so that will be the next step. Onto the leather and cutting it to size. Really nothing special there apart from personal taste. I like to have the suede side to the outside or up, and it's really just around what honing compounds I use and how well those honing compounds take to the leather that I have available to me. So suede side up for me. I simply draw the outline from my base onto the leather. And then what I do is I cut on the outside of that line. I like to have the leather slightly oversized, and I'll be trimming it later. So it's just really cutting out the leather and then applying a contact adhesive. Sorry, slipped my mind. Apply a contact adhesive to the leather and the base. Get it into a clamp, leave it for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll trim the leather and get on with the rest of the build. With the leather cut to size, it's simply a case of applying a spray adhesive and getting the leather onto the base. No secrets here apart from some advices. When you put the leather onto the base, make sure you don't have any bubbles or anything, ripples, under the leather. It just will affect the functionality of the base. If you watched my previous video where I built my push blocks, you'll know that I got some spray adhesive all over the sides. It's not hard to clean off, but I've decided I'm going to look a little bit more professional, and I've marked off the sides of the base. But it's simply a case of applying the adhesive, getting the leather on, and then getting it into a clamp for about 10 to 15 minutes. I use the face vise on my bench, and that's just the way that I like using it. You could also clamp the surface down onto a bench or a big surface with clamps around, similar to what we did with the push block again. So get the adhesive on, get the leather on and into clamps. With the leather applied, the strop is in the vise, leaving it for 10 or 20 minutes to set up before we continue. I always seem to make a mess when I use spray adhesive. So if you have any advice on what I might be doing wrong or how you use spray adhesive without making a mess of your workshop, let me know in the comments. Often you'll see content creators pull their rubber application brushes out of a set glue, wood glue or something like that, and then they tell you how incredibly satisfying that process is. I've got something else that's, for me at least, quite satisfying, and that's when trimming the leather off the face vise or a face vise or a leather strop. Maybe that's why I make so many leather strops. Keep watching until the end and you'll see how I trim excess leather off the strop. But waiting for it to set up, and then we head over to the next couple of steps. And that brings us to the third design feature I like to include in my strops, and that's a simple fence, a round fence in this case, or a dowel as some of us may know it. The cross section on the dowel is 18.5 millimeters. It's about 1.5 inches, 2 inches long, let's say 50 millimeters. Doesn't matter all that much, don't have it too short though. But that gets installed into the bottom of the strop. And the reason why I use a round one is it provides me quite a bit of versatility while using the strop. I can hook the strop over an edge on my workbench, and because it's round, I can swing the strop into any direction I like and use it in that manner. I've mentioned on previous videos that I hate fighting my tools, and having to chase a strop around on my workbench while I'm sharpening qualifies as having to fight my tools. So this is a really nice addition. Also, because it's round, I can hook it into a hold-fast hole or even a dog hole. Just make sure that the diameter on the dowel allows you to use it on your size of dog hole. And that allows me to use the strop anywhere on the bench I like, which is quite handy considering that I don't have a dedicated sharpening station and I need to sharpen on my bench depending on where my workpieces are that I may be busy with. Simply a case of drilling a hole with a Forstner bit. Depth of the hole really is determined by the body of the Forstner bit. In my case, that is 10 millimeters, half an inch should do it for you. Glue this in, clamp it in, and you're good to go. The end on which the fence is installed is somewhat determined by the grain on the suede. Now, suede does have a grain direction, and I'll show you on the other camera. If I swipe my hand towards the camera, you'll see the color of the suede change. If I use my finger and swipe in the different direction, you'll see the lines that it's making. The grain direction lies towards the camera that I've just shown you, and in this case from my left to my right. I want to have my stop on the opposing side of what the grain direction is. So if the grain direction is in this direction, I want my stop here. Grain direction to some extent contributes to one of the drawbacks often quoted why people don't like using strops, and I'll elaborate a little bit more when we get to the follow-up video. But it's really just a case of going over to the drill press, drilling the hole, using some wood glue to get the fence into position, and then we go over to the fourth and final design tweak that I add to my strops. Onto the fourth and final tweak that I add to my strops, and that's simply just adding sandpaper to the bottom of the strop, and that just stops it from slipping around in use. Cut the sandpaper to size, apply glue, clamp it, let the glue dry, and you're done. Well, apart from applying your honing compound of choice. While using my pedestal drill, I realized that it's the first project or job for my pedestal drill on my channel since I built the mobile base for it. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'm leaving the link on the screen as well as in the description, and those plans are still free and available for download in either imperial or metric measurements depending on your taste. So have a look at the links on the screen as well as in the description, and go and have a look at that video and get yourself a set of plans. But once the glue is dry on the sanding paper, that will be done for today. That brings us to the end of another quick build. It's now 3 in a row on my channel. If you like this kind of material, please drop me a note in the comment section. If there's anything in particular you'd like to see me build, let me know. I'll see if I can help you out. If you haven't seen those videos yet, keep watching until the end of this video. I'll leave the links to the prior 2 videos in the end cards on this one. Also stay until the end to see how I trim the leather from the strop using a sharp chisel. It's strangely therapeutic and quite satisfying. It's a little bit weird, I know. But until I see you next time, I hope you have a good one. It was great to have you join me in my workshop. Oh, by the way, keep your eye out on my channel. I'll be using the newly built strop in my next video where I cover some of the innuendos of using a strop. But until next time, be safe in your workshop, and as always, it was great to have you with me. Hope you have a good one. Cheers.